What I would like to share with you today has profoundly affected my bow arm. It has made it much easier to play, much more fun to play, and allowed me to play with a lot more colors and sounds than I was able to do before I learned this. I learned this from my teacher Richard Aaron, and since that time I've experimented with lots of other different ways of using my bow arm, using my arm and my bow to play. And I've consistently come back to his way of using the arm and the bow because of its incredible efficiency and ease and comfortability. Let's first look at the arm. When we move our arm from the shoulder, you'll notice that the hand moves in an arc. When we move our arm from our elbow, you'll also notice that the hand moves in an arc. Move down to a wrist. And the wrist moves up and down this way and a little bit side to side. There's much more motion up and down. Again, if you look at the ends of the fingers, they also are moving in the shape of an arc. When we play with the bow, we want the bow to move in a straight line, one that's perpendicular to the string in order to make the best sound and to make that sound most easily. So how do we get our arm, which moves in arcs, to move in a straight line? This exercise helps us to very easily feel how our arm and our hand and our wrist have to work together to move in a straight line. If you put your bow on the string, I'll put it on the D string, and you hold it with your left hand so that you hold it on the string at the tip of the bow on the string. Then put your bow hand on the bow just like you were playing all the way at the tip. Carefully feel what part of your finger touches the bow. Feel what part of your finger, your first finger touches the bow, your second finger, what part of your third finger, what part of your fourth finger. For this exercise, it's most effective to put your fourth finger on the top of the stick of the bow, although this applies the same as if it were down, but it's easiest to feel this motion if you put it on the top of the stick. Also feel where your thumb touches the stick. Now slide your hand along the bow, keeping the fingers and the thumb touching in exactly the same places as they move along. You can go back out. And your arm will naturally move the way it needs to move to make the bow move in a straight line. You'll notice that the shoulder moves, the elbow moves, and the wrist moves. Crucially, we'll talk today about the wrist. You notice when I'm at the tip out here, the wrist makes a pretty straight line with the arm. It may even bend back a little bit this way, but not very much. Pretty straight. As it comes in, it gradually adjusts, bending up so the wrist is higher than the hand to keep the fingers on the bow and keep the bow moving in a straight line. As I go back out, the wrist gradually straightens out and comes back to its starting position with a straight line with the arm. If the wrist is not flexible and doesn't bend like that, here's what happens. Notice how the fingers slide off the bow until they're not in a good position to control the bow. I'm almost touching the bow stick with the tip of my finger instead of down between the first and second joints. The fourth finger is completely slid off the side of the bow where it cannot help to balance the bow. The hand is turned back toward my right side rather than being tipped toward the first finger a little bit. Show that again. If my wrist does not adjust, stays straight, it pushes the fingers off the bow. However, if my wrist does adjust and bends nicely, it keeps the fingers in their same contact, place where I can manipulate the bow and have control of the bow in both the fingers, the hand, and the arm. When I do this first with students, they usually end up like this. And I ask them to find the way to move so that their fingers can stay on the in their same place. Usually takes some experimentation, and then I have them identify how the wrist is different when it comes in here. And they'll use their own words. I describe it as the wrist is being bent up or higher than the hand. They may use different words to describe it, but their description is important because that's what's going to help them to remember that motion. You need to practice this on all the strings because it will be different on each string. For example, if we go to the C string, you'll notice that your wrist is not as flat as it was on the D string, and that it bends up more coming in to the string. On the A string, because your arm is reached out further, you feel the different reach of the arm. The wrist is even a little bit lower. It doesn't bend up quite as high coming in. Then you can do this with nice hobos on an open string, and you can see that my wrist does exactly what it did when I was sliding along the stick. To keep the bow driving straight and to most effectively transmit the energy and the power from my back into the string to make a sound. If you watch great cellists play, you will see that many of them have this function in their wrist. However, it may look different in each person. It's may look different when I do it opposed to when you do it and when your student does it. What is important is the function, the easy, relaxed motion of the wrist. I like to think of it as a hinge. Just like the hinges on a door, when you move the door, the hinge opens and closes. The hinge does not move the door, but the door moves and makes the hinge move. When I bow, the bow wants to move in a straight line because that's the most effective way for it to make a sound. The arm moves in its curves and it gradually pushes the wrist up or down in a passive way. The wrist is passive, not active in this motion. It allows itself to be moved by the motion of the arm and the bow. Some things that can impede that motion are tension. For example, if you squeeze between your thumb and your fingers, like some people end up doing with the bow, if you squeeze between your thumb and your fingers, you'll notice that your wrist becomes locked. It is no longer flexible, no longer available to make that easy, flexible motion. Some other ways to develop this fluidity and motion in your wrist are the ski jumps that we often do with our left hand. Irene Sharp, the great cello teacher, recommends also doing those with your bow hand because that develops both the motion of the arm, the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist as they have to make the hand move along a straight line. You'll notice the wrist is bent up more here and it flattens out as we go down. You can also practice them both up and down as more of a monorail or a train car moving up and down the track. Another way violinists do this a lot is the bow exercise where you go up and down in the air, keeping the bow perfectly straight up and down. If the wrist moves in this natural fluid motion up and down, it will keep the bow straight up and down. If the wrist stays locked in one position, the bow goes crooked or in an arc and follows the motion of the arm. It can happen the other way if it stays locked in the up position. Also, the exercise that some teachers call XXT or rowboats works that flexibility of the wrist in different parts of the bow along its trajectory. So for example, in the middle of the bow you can make the shape of an X with the bow hair and your string, and you can make the shape of an X this way with the bow hair and your string. Notice how much flexibility you have to have in the wrist to do that as the arm moves back and forth. And then you come to the place where it makes the shape of a T or a right angle with the string. Practicing that in all parts of the bow helps your body to find the natural position that the wrist needs to be in that part of the bow, as well as developing its suppleness and flexibility to move naturally in those parts of the bow. Again, if you go on YouTube and watch many great cellists, you will see the function of the wrist moving this way. Some really excellent examples of people you can see it very clearly in are the German cellist Johannes Moser. If you find some YouTube videos of him, you will see how it works in his bow arm. He's a very tall person with long arms, and you'll see how that works in his technique and with the way he sits with his cello. You can watch Janos Starker, the great cellist and teacher, in some of his videos. If you watch, there's a video of him playing the Casado solo suite and the Kodaly solo suite and the Bach C major suite. You'll notice this easy, fluid motion in his wrist as he bows in and out. Also, the great French cellist and teacher André Navarra. There's a great video of him playing the Schumann Concerto where you can see that happening in his wrist. And even better, there's a video of him explaining his cello technique. He's talking in French and it's overdubbed in German, but if you go about 10 minutes into the full, complete cello talk video, you'll find him demonstrating just on an open G string the motion of his arm, and you'll very clearly see his wrist bending up toward the frog, bending down, it goes toward the tip in a really natural, easy way. So I hope you find this useful and can apply it both in your own playing and with your students if you're a teacher. And let me know if you have any questions or comments.